This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agner.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name is Jay Agner. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by CEO and founder Rob Wenger of Higher Logic. Higher Logic, the industry-leading human-focused engagement platform, delivers powerful online communities and communication tools to engage members and customers at every stage of their journey. I've never said that much for any intro. Rob, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good to be here. Good to see you, Jay.
It's a lot of words there. What is Higher Logic? It's a community building platform. Am I getting that right? What is it? And, give
Yeah,
me a
online.
condensed version.
It's for hosting online communities. So we have about 3,000 clients, some big name corporate clients, and then a bunch of nonprofits and all over the world. So we have offices in the U.S., Canada, and Australia. And yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun building communities of thousands of people to talk to each other about whatever they want to talk about. It's usually professional stuff though, like doctors, lawyers, accountants, that kind of thing.
Were you a community builder guy before this?
I'm a software builder guy, and I've worked with associations for how long? I don't know, more than 25 years probably. And they are natural communities. That's what they exist for, groups of people to learn from each other and network and that kind of thing. And so back when LinkedIn was pretty new, I joined pretty early, and I joined, some friend invited me, and I went in there and I'm like, I don't know anybody in this thing. And the idea was, well, hey, if you go to an association, they all do know each other day one. So if you had a LinkedIn just for associations, each one you brought up, the people would already know each other. So that was the idea. It grew from LinkedIn style networking to sharing documents, threaded discussions, events, volunteering, and a bunch of other things. So it's grown over the 17 plus years that we've been doing this thing, and yeah, it's got a bright future too. I think AI is going to make it even more valuable. So we're excited.
What is something that you learned about communities in general, or building communities, that you didn't know before you started this?
Yeah, something maybe that I wouldn't have expected is that, and it's just the law of large numbers. Any big group of people, there's a certain percentage of people that love to talk, and most people don't. And that percentage is actually holds pretty steady. Whether you'd think that engineers, being introverts, wouldn't, and yet they do. And you think salespeople, would be all over it, and they're just the same as engineers. So it's funny, on a scale of thousands or tens of thousands, the percentages are pretty steady, which I was surprised at that. It does depend on the size, like I said. So a small group as a percent, there's a whole lot more participation than a big group. But if you get really big, you get to those numbers. So it's pretty
What's
cool.
the ideal group size for communication to stay active and for it to feel? Because I consider myself a community builder guy, just because I've done it with gaming leagues, and I have an astrophotography community, and we've got 2,600 people, and it's like, so I'm curious, just like, is there a size that things start to break down or become less active, and then you have to do more stuff to engage people? Like, what's the breakdown?
Yeah, I wouldn't say size is so much the driver. It's more like, how important is it in your life? So you said gamer. If you're a gamer, gaming is very important in your life, right? I'm not that much of a gamer. Gaming's not very important in my life. I might join one and then never participate, right? But if it's like your job, then it's gonna work pretty well. If it's your hobby that you love, right, like gaming or golf or whatever, then it's gonna work pretty well. But if it's something like like, let's say, Dell computers, like, no one's that into Dell computers. And so in that case, it tends to be huge numbers, but participation as a percent is low. Would you need it though, right? So if I have a problem with my Dell computer and I want to go ask a question, I'm super glad that thing is there, but I'm not going to join per se, right? So it just depends.
What's the number one thing, other than activity, which is kind of the answer to this question anyway, to make a group successful and long lasting and exciting and engaging? Like, what is it? What is the magic sauce?
Well, so it really depends on your goals. So engaging in a signing isn't necessarily everyone's goal, right?
Sure.
So
Okay, that's
in
fair.
the Dell example, the goal is to give people 24/7 access to support, right? So that's a good goal. And you don't necessarily have to have an engaging community for that. You'll still have the people that love coming in and answering questions just because they do, who are non paid, volunteers, love the brand, that kind of thing. So they're engaged, but the broader audience of millions and millions of consumer customers probably isn't terribly engaged. That
Mhm,
said, like I said, what is really important part of your job, like maybe you're a Dell server administrator, that would be a better community because they would every day they think about that stuff, right? And so
mhm,
in that case, they're going to be much more likely to talk to each other, build relationships with each other, et cetera. So on LinkedIn, I have, I don't know, 4,000 friends, right? Contacts, whatever they call them. But they're
mhm,
doctors and lawyers and accountants and everything else. And so I don't have as much in common with them as I do with a community of software CEOs, for example, which I belong to that
mhm.
community. That's much more active and more important to me than LinkedIn, in general in terms of my engagement level. So
Hmm.
I've answered your question, but yeah, it really does depend. But there are certainly 300-person communities that are super engaged. They're helping each other all day, every day, and then
Yeah.
there's 50,000-person ones that are not terribly engaged because there's it's more come in, get your answer, and leave kind of thing.
Well, I think how important is it in your life sums it up very well.
Mhm.
Like, especially with your Dell point. And by the way, we're not sponsored by Dell, so I don't really have any. I mean, we said their name a lot, but
Tip it out.
I'm actually looking at my Dell monitor right now. If if you only have a question once every 2 years, then you don't give a shit what's going on in that community every day. So like, it's really. I mean, I think you summed it up very nicely, and it's an interesting kind of paradigm to think about when building a community. It's like the goal really is the impetus of all the interactions there because it shapes and molds kind of the whole thing. What's the strangest thing you've seen somebody build a community around?
Strangest thing to build it around. I wouldn't say I've seen anything terribly strange because we sell mostly to, larger
Okay.
organizations that have a lot of money and they don't do things that are too crazy. I've seen some pretty strange conversations. My favorite one was when we first launched the New Jersey Society of CPAs, right? Certified Public Accountants.
Wild bunch.
15
Wild
years.
bunch, I'm
They're
sure.
crazy. Well, but this is exactly what I expected. And then what we do is we suggest they get some seed questions to get it going. So people are like, what is this thing? And they see some good questions and answers, and they think, oh, okay, I can see the value of this, right? Sort of a demo to all the members. And they might have had 40,000 people. But halfway through that 1 week of seed questions, a random member asked a question about basically he said, I have a client who's a clown, literally a clown, and he wants to know if he can write off, I don't remember what it was, his clown car or whatever, his floppy shoes, whatever it was. And that thread just blew up. Like it made that community what it is today. One guy
Oh,
asked
that's
a question,
great.
hundreds of replies in the first day on people who'd never been in a community before, probably, well, never been in a community like this. And it blew up. So you just never know like what's
Can you
gonna.
manufacture that though? Is there some way to bottle that and like the seed for new communities?
Yeah, I mean, we see questions, but they tend to be much more professional, right? Like these are professional communities, almost all of them we do, and so they tend to be professional things, like they're related to government bills, what's going on in the world. We try and stay away from politics because a big group of people's got people on both sides, and it degenerates quickly. So
Mhm,
we advise people, shut down politics type stuff, unless that's what you do, right? If you're a lobbying organization, obviously politics are your thing, but like
mhm.
the Trump versus not Trump, that just goes
Yeah,
badly.
not gonna go very well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, it's just interesting, the point with the lawyer question, I find fascinating because it's almost like you could see a world where you could seed community questions with something that's close, but, like, adjacent enough that it makes people go like, "What the hell are they talking?" And then, like, it does spark conversation around so it is an interesting thought of, like, how do you seed something brand it's the community thing is always interesting to me because it's like, as someone who builds communities, like, at first, it's just you yelling into the void and there's
Yeah.
nobody there, and you have to figure out, like, how do I and it's always just this really interesting social experiment for me. Like, how do you take like literally like an empty forum and make it active. And
Yep. Yep. Yep.
have you found that the moderation group or the owner of the group or the leaders of the group or whatever, their interactivity drives a lot of the success of those groups? Like I've found that like being part of the group more
Sure.
always kind of continues the mission, whatever that mission is. Do you find that to kind of be similar in those groups?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have two types of clients. So we've got the kind you're talking about, right? Which would be, well, so let's say there's three types. There's the type where someone like you starts a community and you're the only person, you're trying to build it, right? We do fewer of those than we do the other two. The other two are, it's a company and they have clients and they want their clients to talk to each other and help each other
Mhm.
and interact with with the company, right? So we do it. We have our own. It's called Hug, the Higher Logic User Group, and we have several, like 4 or 5 thousand people in there, and they talk to us and to each other. And so our staff is
Mhm.
there all day long. I go in and answer questions, etc. So that type, you do. It does start with a big group because usually you say, well, let's take all of our clients and put them in, and then as
Mhm.
the client base grows, the community grows. But it's not starting from nothing.
Right.
And then in that case, yes, the participation of the company's representatives or whatever is super helpful to making the community work. And the third case is we have these nonprofits, right? Like the CPA Society, and they have a ton, tens of thousands of people. Boom, they're in day one. And in that case, these are professionals with their professional ID. Like they don't use avatars, they use your real face. You link to your LinkedIn. And so they tend to want to talk to each other. And the staff of the association, they're not CPAs typically, right? So they're not
Mhm.
doctors and lawyers and accountants. So they can't really participate. They can guide and they can, moderate, but they don't
Mhm.
tend to participate because they can't answer questions on neurosurgery or,
Right.
heart attacks, and they
Right.
should, right? So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah. So it depends on the category. Like I said, you tend not to buy software this expensive when you are one person because the footprint, the minimum footprint is enough that you'd be making a bet that this is going to pay off. So you start on something like a LinkedIn group or Facebook group or whatever. When you get to a point where it's successful, then you say, "Well, we need more professional management. I want all the data. I don't want Facebook
Mhm.
and LinkedIn to take it and show ads for things that I don't appreciate, or
Mhm.
I want your private version." You don't typically do that until you've got something of an audience.
And is there zombie communities where, like, they were active and then they slowly just peter off into nothing? Like, do you have those? And, like, what do you do if, like, they're just kind of a ship out to sea with no captain?
Yeah, that tends to happen more when you have so when we say communities, we've got our client builds a community site, and within there, you can have smaller communities. Like in my
Mhm.
CEO group that I belong to, this is software CEOs in the DC area. There's the general community, and that one's active. But then they always want to form some additional community, like people who want to invest in other DC area companies. And
Mhm.
so they'll make a sub community or another community. And those tend to peter out. Like they'll get a lot of activity for a while and then nothing, no one posts for a while. And then people forget about it and they don't, and then they post
Mhm.
one again. So we don't see often that the main one dies. What we see is you try and spread it too thin and those spread out ones die. And then we just kind of pull them back. So just take
Mhm.
post everything here, use tags, instead of separate communities, for example. They're professionals. Now, whether they get the ROI or not is a question, right? So a corporation might say, yeah, we're getting participation, but it's not deflecting enough cost to justify it. And then
Mhm.
we say, that's a fixable problem. All you have to do is X, Y, and Z. We have all these plans, we have automation in there, at mentions, things that we can tell them how to do it that
Mhm.
will bring the participation back up. Usually, when it dies, it's because both that happens and then they don't put anything into it. Like they get rid of their community manager or the moderators.
Mhm.
And then it tends to, whether it fails or not, it tends to maybe not be as worthwhile as what they thought it would be.
And are you guys do you guys provide those community managers as part of what you guys do?
We do, not often. I mean, usually our clients are big enough that they have their own.
They have their own kinda what is the job just like where do you find one of those people? Do they have to be a community manager somewhere else first?
Didn't have to be first. Often they're coming from like a marketing role or a membership
Okay.
role.
Yeah, yeah.
There
Okay.
are a whole ton of professional community managers now. There probably weren't 20 years
Mhm.
ago. Today,
Right.
there's thousands, tens of thousands
Yeah.
probably. I don't think it's a degree yet, but like there are plenty of people you can find.
Reddit University. I think
Yeah,
they'll
you go, exactly.
they'll take you in. All right, well, let's talk about you for a second. I'm sorry, I get so excited about the community building stuff. I forgot to even talk about you. So, hey, Rob, how are you? What? Why did you start this business, and who was your first customer?
So we started it because of that thing I was talking about with LinkedIn. It was like I saw the vision of LinkedIn, but it's going to take a while was my thought, right? And it was the kind you're talking about where you start with one and it builds up. Now, of course, they have
Mhm.
a billion or whatever the number is now, so it worked.
Right.
But what I thought was, well, I would like to talk about my profession with others in my profession only. So sort of a vetted membership based thing.
Mhm.
And so the idea was, well, again, I was in the associate market already, and I just saw like this is what's missing. Like they need a good way to share things online. If you're doing contracts, share sample contracts. If you're doing one of our first clients was eye surgeons, and they were sharing videos of eye surgeries, which by the way
Yeah.
was not fun
Holy
to
sh!
test our
Good
software
lord.
on. For me, I'm sure if you're an eye surgeon, it's awesome, but for me, I was like, oh,
Oh, make the
but
eye water thinking about it.
yeah, exactly. But if you think about like what they told me when we first started talking to them was they can get the best eye surgeon in the world who, is in New York City or whatever and is doing this great surgery that's super important. And then some doctor in a third world country who doesn't have access to this kind of technology can just watch that video over and over and because he's got to perform one tomorrow or hopefully not tomorrow, but at some point. Maybe he's got a few pigs in the way, but you know what I mean? Like the point is you're taking the best of the best and disseminating that. And so we always used to say, and it's a Kennedy quote, I think, the rising tide lifts all the boats, right? So
Mhm.
the more you share, the more everybody gets better. And so that was the concept. It started as networking and education, and then it turned into, user generated content, sharing, questions, answers, support deflection. There's like all kinds of use cases for it. And most
Mhm.
of our clients have more than one. You have the occasional one that is like just, hey, I want people to come here, get their answer, and leave, like in the Dell example. And Dell's not a client of ours, by the way. That's why I use them. But then there's these ones where it's like, I'm super engaged. I do this job every day. I need to know what's going on every day. So
Mhm.
I forgot what your question was, but hopefully that answered
I did too. It's fine. It's
it.
okay. This is not even
Yeah.
nobody's gonna hear this. It's fine. Nobody who listens to these shows. It's okay. So, how has the customer changed over time? Like, who's your customer today versus like when you were just setting out? You made this thing for yourself. You're like, all right, it's kind of viable. It's a solution. Who are they today versus back then?
It's actually not all that different. I think the tools we deliver are bigger, right? The core product is actually the same conceptually. Not
Mhm.
literally the same, but it's the same conceptually. So it's all about communication and sharing. And so I wouldn't say that the customer's that different. Now we have gone into the corporate market. We have, you know, 500 or 600 big corporations as clients in all over the, software and hardware and games and just like all kinds of things. And so I guess probably the use cases have expanded more so than I think the audience has per se. But the newest thing I think is the multiple use cases per. So where you might buy it just to do support deflection, you find out, well, now we've got a lot of participants. Let's make them into advocates. Let's make them into
Mhm.
who do references for us or can speak at our conference or can write case studies with us and things like that. And so those, then they'll give them a special sort of community space so they can engage with each other. And then you can do it, CEOs versus CFOs versus rank and file. And it's like CEOs may not want to talk to, low level marketing people. I'm just making this up, but like I've never seen that, but it's possible. And so you can segment. And then the use case for the CEOs is like, hey, this is the only place I can talk to other CEOs because everyone else in my company, is works for me. Not the truth necessarily, right? So you have these cases within cases, and that's where it starts to get really interesting because we have security that blocks people from seeing stuff they shouldn't see, and then that gives them these kind of private spaces within private spaces.
And how does the competitive landscape look for you guys today? Is there a ton, I'm going to assume there's a ton of community building websites out there. Where do you guys kind of fit in the list of who's who when there's community building software comes up?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of professional communities like the ones I've described, there's not a ton of companies. It's half a dozen maybe, and we're one of the one or two in that group. So
Mm-hmm.
we probably are the biggest in the professional ones. You'll see things like Nextdoor, right? I wouldn't count them a competitor certainly, but they're building communities of like physical communities, right?
Yeah.
Similar in concept, but and then there's others like who do it for, let's say, chambers of commerce, where the members are all in my city, but one guy owns a gas station and another guy is a plastic surgeon. Like, do they have a lot to talk about? Maybe not, but it's not the way we do it, right? Ours are much
Mm-hmm.
like we have a very common interest in order to make this thing happen, or it's that kind of deflection type one where it's like the common interest is we own the same computer, right? But yeah, so there's specialties. There's others who specialize in areas that our software might be good for, but theirs might be better just because they specialize.
I feel like we're doing this podcast in reverse because I'm asking all the questions at the beginning at the end, but I do want to ask it still anyway. Uh, where did you grow up, and did that have an impact on you being the entrepreneur you are today?
Yes, I grew up in the Washington D.C. area, so I lived in Maryland, Virginia, and D.C. at different parts of my life, but all within 10
10
miles.
seconds of each other.
10 miles of the district. Yeah, exactly. So in terms of entrepreneurial, that probably came from my dad. He actually worked for the government, but he always had some. He was a software developer. He always had some side business going that he was building things. My mom too would start new businesses and things like that. So I think I got the entrepreneurial bug from them. In terms of software, it's not Silicon Valley, but it's probably number two or three in software companies. Obviously, a lot work for the government, which I avoided the whole time, but
Mhm.
not necessarily purposely, but somewhat purposely. And then of course associations. That's how I got into that because they're big there. 54% of the U.S. associations are in the D.C. area
Hmm.
because a lot of them lobby the government,
Yep.
and so you want to be in Washington, and so we have plenty all over the country and all over the world, but the majority, more than half, are in the D.C. area. So not necessary today, but back then you wanted to go and knock on doors and meet people and shake hands. You don't do that so much today, so it's less important. But we do have an office there still, even though I live out in Utah.
Okay. If you had to start over tomorrow
Yep.
in 2025, in the landscape that it is today with the discords of the world and all the communities, that are out there,
Mhm.
what would be step 1 to start Higher Logic again tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, starting a company is both easier and harder today, I think, than it was when I did it. It's easier in that with AI, you can make the software more rapidly. It's harder in that it's hard to get a business off the ground, I think. There's a lot of tools now that'll make it easier to reach people, but without the, I don't know, without the physical meetings that used to take place that got us started, without the networking that you need, not just for customers, but for helping you get your business started. It's just harder, I think, today to do that than it was then. And of course, competition would be harder, right? So if there's an
Hmm.
established player, like for us, for example, I wouldn't want to compete with us because we generate between 1 and 2 billion interactions with our customers
Hmm.
a month,
Oh,
and
wow.
having just terabytes and terabytes of data to work from gives us somewhat insurmountable advantage. And so I think it's difficult in software, at least, as much as I might say, hey, go use Cursor and make a product, you know in a tenth the time it took me to make it. You're starting with nothing, and and
Mhm.
compete in that. Now, if it's a greenfield thing, that's great. If it's a brand new idea and no one's doing it, and community was sort of that way 17 years ago, it's a little easier. But if it's something where you're going to go in and try and take it, like a year ago, everyone was like, "Oh my god, these tools are going to make it so easy. These competitors are going to pop out of nowhere, and 5 kids in a basement are going to make the next, awesome thing." It's like, yeah, but I don't think that's going to happen at a rate any faster than it's happened historically. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It happened with Facebook. It happened with Apple. It happened, these famous stories of, one or two people starting these, Fortune 10 companies. But I don't think it happens in the next 5 years at a rate any faster, not significantly faster than it did then.
Okay. Do you pay any attention to personal brand?
Personal brand?
Yeah,
There's
your own personal brand. Do you put much stock into it? Do you do anything to kinda make like, what do you do to kinda control the narrative around your personal brand?
Yeah, I mean, my brand is the company's brand. Being co-founder and CEO, I care about people buying our software, keeping our software, buying more of our software. So I do get out a lot, right? I speak a lot. I write a lot. I post on LinkedIn. My marketing team markets me as much as they market the brand. In some cases,
Mhm.
not as much, but some fraction as much. So it gets developed, but it's really for Higher Logic. I'm wearing my Higher Logic apparel.
I
Oops,
see that. It's very spiffy. I might need to get one of those.
it is.
I'll rock the brand.
There you go. Exactly. Exactly.
Beautiful. Alright, I have one more question for you. This
Yep.
has nothing to do with higher logic, nothing to do with business, just Rob being Rob. If you do anything on earth and you knew you wouldn't fail, what would it be?
I knew I wouldn't fail. That's a good question. I live to work, so it's hard for me to think of anything outside. Probably it would be just build another software company and have fun in the building stage. I mean, today Higher Logic's 300 people, and it is fun. I enjoy it quite a bit, but it was easier when there were three, right, or five.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
was more fun. We went to lunch together every Tuesday, and always to the same sushi restaurant. Things like
But you could still do that. It would just be a very large
and very
lunch
expensive.
order. Very expensive, large lunch order. Alright, so you'd start another software company. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
typically I'll push people for like a different answer, but I do feel like that you just enjoy it, and I feel like,
I do.
it's a fair answer for somebody that's all they enjoy, so, alright, fair enough. Rob, you were fantastic. Where can people reach out to you directly if they wanna talk to you about something they heard today?
LinkedIn's easy. It's just Rob Wenger. Email rob@higherlogic.com. Or, yeah, those are probably the two best ways.
All right. And we'll point people to higherlogic.com for all their human focused engagement online communities. I'm not going to read it all. Rob, you're great, man. I appreciate you, brother. Be good. And we'll talk again soon. All right.
Yeah, a lot of fun, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rob. See you, man.
See ya.